I used to think of myself as an ordinary guy. You know, the type quiet, keeps his head down, goes to work, pays the bills. Not the life of the party, not the guy everyone notices. And honestly, I was okay with that. Predictability meant stability. Boring, maybe, but safe. That's why Emily loved me. At least, that's what she used to say. We'd been married for 6 years, together for 9. Emily was my anchor, my partner in every sense of the word. She was the bright one in our duo, outgoing, quick with a joke, the kind of person who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with a handful of new friends. I admired that about her. Hell, I needed that about her. She pulled me out of my shell. Or maybe she used to. I noticed the shift on a Saturday evening at a party for Mike and Sarah's 10-year wedding anniversary. Mike and I had been friends since college, roommates who'd survived bad ramen, worse decisions, and somehow came out the other side with decent careers. Mike was a good guy. Sarah, too. Their relationship always seemed rock solid, almost enviable. The party wasn't anything extravagant. Just a bunch of familiar faces in Mike's backyard, a string of fairy lights, a portable speaker playing early 2000s hits. Comfortably predictable. Right up my alley. Emily was radiant that night. She wore this deep green dress, simple, but the way it hugged her waist made it impossible not to notice her. I wasn't the only one who noticed either. That became clear soon enough. I was chatting with an old coworker near the drinks table, half listening to a story I'd probably heard before when I spotted her across the yard. Emily was laughing, really laughing, with some guy I didn't recognize. He was younger than me, maybe late 20s, with that annoyingly perfect stubble and a smile like he knew exactly how to use it. His body language was textbook flirtation. Leaning in, mirroring her movements, casually brushing her arm. I stood there for a moment, processing what I was seeing. It wasn't jealousy that hit me first. It was confusion. Emily had always been friendly, maybe even a little flirty by nature, but this felt different. Too mate. Too familiar. When she caught my gaze, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, she was too composed for that. But there was a flicker of recognition. Like she knew what I was thinking. And in a heartbeat, she pivoted. Shifted the conversation. Gestured toward the dessert table. Pretended it was all nothing. But it wasn't nothing. That moment lodged itself in my mind like a splinter. Small. Easy to overlook. But impossible to ignore once it's under your skin. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I kept trying to shake it off. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was harmless. We left early, citing early work meetings that didn't exist. The car ride home was filled with casual chatter, Emily going on about how nice it was to see Mike and Sarah, how we should host something similar. I nodded in the right places, but my mind was elsewhere. It was such a subtle shift, really. One moment, life feels solid. The next, a crack appears. And once you see it, you start to wonder how long it's been there. When we got home, I watched as Emily kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. She was so at ease, so normal, that for a second I felt ridiculous for even thinking twice about it. But I couldn't shake the image. That smile she gave him, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the same way she used to do with me in the early days. Little things. Details. And those are the things that get you. I didn't confront her. What would I even say? Hey, you looked a little too happy talking to some guy at a party. Care to explain? It sounded paranoid. Petty. That's not who I was. But it was the first time I wondered if Emily was still as present in this marriage as I was. In the days that followed, that moment kept replaying in my head. It wasn't about one conversation. It was the fact that for a split second I wasn't sure who I was looking at. The Emily I knew wouldn't have reacted like that. Or maybe I just thought I knew her. Maybe that was the real problem. I started noticing more things after that. Small things. The way she'd leave the room to answer her phone. How she'd stay up late scrolling through social media with this detached, faraway look. How she laughed more at texts than at anything I said. Were these new behaviors, or had they always been there, hiding in plain sight? One evening we were sitting on the couch watching some mindless show. I glanced over at her, and for a moment it was like I was looking at a stranger. She was right there, physically present, but her mind was miles away. The gap between us felt wider than it ever had. Still, I didn't press. I convinced myself it was just a phase. People drift sometimes. Work stress, life stress. We'd been through worse. Or so I thought. It's funny how you can live with someone, share a bed with them, and yet be completely blind to the quiet unraveling of your relationship. Like erosion. Slow. Silent. Relentless. I found myself thinking back to that night at the party more often than I wanted to admit. The way her body angled toward him. The quick flicker of nerves when our eyes met. The smooth redirection of conversation. It wasn't the actions themselves, it was the instinct to hide it from me. That was the real red flag. Still, no confrontations. No accusations. I told myself I needed more than a gut feeling. I needed something concrete. Something real. But deep down, a part of me already knew. That night at Mike's party wasn't the beginning of something. It was the beginning of the end. After that night at Mike's party, I wanted to believe I was overthinking things. That Emily's interaction with that guy, whoever he was, meant nothing. But once suspicion creeps in, it's like a crack in glass. You can pretend it's fine, but every glance, every word, starts to feel like more proof that something's broken. It didn't happen overnight. First, I brushed it off. Work was keeping us both busy. We'd gone through dry spells before, emotionally, physically. Life gets in the way. That's marriage, right? But then Emily started staying late at work more often. Not unusual at first. She was a project manager at a tech company. Crunch time happens. Deadlines pile up. I get that. But this was different. She wasn't just working late. She was being vague. Her explanations were thin. Meetings, client calls, team dinners. Always something that couldn't quite be pinned down. One Thursday, I came home earlier than usual. Traffic had been unusually light, and I thought it'd be nice to surprise her. Maybe grab takeout and spend an actual evening together. But when I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was already in the garage. For a split second, relief. Finally, she was home early. But when I walked into the house, the lights were off. The silence was heavy, not peaceful. Emily wasn't in the kitchen, not in the living room. I called her name. No answer. I checked the bedroom. Empty. I pulled out my phone and dialed her. She picked up after a few rings, her voice breathless. "Hey, babe. I'm just grabbing coffee with Rachel. You're home early. Everything okay?" Rachel? Convenient. Rachel was her go-to alibi. Nice girl. Safe choice. But Emily's car was in the garage. There was no Uber notification. No taxi outside. I didn't call her out. Not then. "Yeah, just got home early. Thought I'd see if you wanted to do dinner," I said casually. "Oh, that would have been nice. But this meeting might run a little long. Don't wait up." Her words were smooth, but rushed, like she was filling space, buying time. "All right," I said, forcing a smile she couldn't see. "Talk later." When she hung up, I just stood there, phone still in my hand, staring out the window. My gut twisted with the realization. She was lying, and not even trying very hard to cover it up. I walked back through the house, looking for anything out of place. Nothing obvious. No extra shoes by the door. No jacket slung over a chair. But everything felt wrong. Later that night, when she finally came home, Emily acted like everything was normal. She breezed into the house with a to-go cup in hand, tossing her keys into the bowl by the door. "Hey, sorry that ran long. You wouldn't believe how much Rachel can talk," she said with a laugh. I watched her, trying to read between the lines. There was something performative about it, like she was playing the role of good wife on autopilot. The casual kiss on my cheek. The exaggerated yawn. It was all too neat. I wanted to confront her, right then. But I didn't. Because once you open that door, you can't close it again. And I wasn't ready. Not yet. But I started paying attention. Really paying attention. The phone was the next thing. She used to be careless with it. Leaving it face up on the table, tossing it on the couch while she did laundry. But suddenly it was always in her hand. Or face down. Or conveniently left in her purse on silent. Notifications would light up the screen. Names I didn't recognize. Generic labels like work group or just initials. She was careful, but not careful enough. One night, I caught her smiling at a message. Not a quick glance, but a lingering, soft smile. The kind she used to have for me. When she noticed me watching, her expression shifted instantly, replaced by a furrowed brow. "Ugh, work drama," she said, sliding her phone into her pocket. "You don't want to know." I didn't press, but it felt like a wall was going up between us. Over the next few weeks, the distance grew. Conversations turned shallow. Our routines became parallel lines, living under the same roof, but barely intersecting. She'd stay up late working in the office, or so she said. I'd hear her voice, hushed, sometimes laughing, but never loud enough for me to catch the words. I started keeping track, mentally at first, then embarrassingly in my notes app. Times she said she was working late. Nights she came home looking a little too perfect for a long day. Patterns began to emerge. I even drove by her office once, just to see. Her car wasn't there. That night, I barely slept. It's strange, the games your mind plays when you suspect someone you love is lying to you. Every small inconsistency becomes evidence. Every unexplained smile, every quick glance at the phone. You become a detective in your own life. But what eats you alive isn't the evidence. It's the uncertainty, the not knowing. I tried talking to her, tried to get ahead of it. One evening, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, I asked her, "Are you happy, Em?" She looked up, surprised. "Of course I am. Why?" "I don't know. You've seemed distracted lately. Distant." She smiled, a tight, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Work's been crazy. You know how it is." I nodded, but the pit in my stomach deepened. That was the moment I realized she wasn't going to tell me the truth. If I wanted answers, I'd have to find them myself. But even then, I wasn't ready to cross certain lines. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who snoops, who checks phones, who becomes the paranoid husband. But the weight of not knowing was starting to suffocate me. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. Reflexively, I glanced at the screen. Just a name. One I didn't recognize. But the preview of the message was enough to send my heart into overdrive. "Can't wait to see you again. I miss your smile." It was like a punch to the gut. Short, casual, devastating. I didn't touch the phone, didn't open the message, but I didn't need to. The words were enough. When Emily came back into the room, towel wrapped around her hair, she was her usual self. She talked about work, about needing new shoes, about how we should plan a weekend getaway. And I sat there, nodding, knowing that somewhere between her words was a truth she wasn't ready to admit. That night, as she slept beside me, her breathing soft and steady, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My mind was a storm of questions. How long had this been going on? Who was this guy? And more importantly, why? But perhaps the cruelest part of all was realizing that I already knew the answer. Something had changed. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was both of us, slowly drifting apart while pretending everything was fine. But pretending doesn't hold forever. The walls were cracking. I just hadn't figured out how to deal with the collapse yet. There's a moment when suspicion turns into certainty. You don't always realize it right away. Sometimes it's a gradual shift, like the tide creeping in, lapping at your feet until suddenly you're underwater. For me, that moment came on a rainy Tuesday night. Emily was working late again. Another client meeting. Another reason to stay out past dinner. I wasn't even surprised anymore. Disappointed? Sure. Angry? Definitely. But surprised? No. That ship had sailed weeks ago. But this time felt different. Heavier. Like the air itself was warning me. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the condensation sliding down my glass of water, ignoring the leftovers going cold on the table. The house was too quiet. Emily's absence wasn't new, but tonight, the silence was suffocating. Her phone was still there. That was unusual. She never left it behind anymore. It was like an extension of her hand lately. Always guarded. Always close. But tonight, there it sat, on the edge of the kitchen counter, screen down, as if daring me to pick it up. For 15 agonizing minutes, I stared at that phone. My heart pounding. My mind racing. I knew what kind of man I wanted to be, the trusting husband, the bigger person, the one who doesn't snoop because, if you have to check, it's already over. But that was easy to say when you weren't drowning in doubt. Tonight, the doubt was winning. With a trembling hand, I picked up her phone. No password. She never thought I'd look. Or maybe she wanted me to. Either way, the screen lit up, and within seconds, I found what I had been trying so hard to avoid. A text thread with a name I didn't recognize. Just a first name. Simple. Innocuous. But the messages weren't. Him, I can't wait for the next time you come to see me. Do you already miss me? Emily, of course I do. You make it so hard to focus on work these days, face-blowing kiss. My stomach twisted. That stupid little emoji felt like a slap in the face. There were more messages. Some flirty. Some downright in asterisk mate. Details about their meetings, inside jokes I wasn't part of, references to places she'd claimed were work events. It was all there. A digital monument to betrayal. I sat back, numb. The world seemed to tilt slightly, like my brain couldn't fully process what my eyes were reading. A part of me had known. Deep down, I think I always knew. But seeing it right there in plain text was different. Concrete. Undeniable. When Emily finally walked through the door an hour later, she looked the same as always. Same professional smile. Same breezy tone. "Hey, sorry, that ran longer than expected. How was your day?" she asked, hanging her coat like this was just another evening. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my pocket and slowly placed her phone on the table between us. Her smile faltered. "What's this?" she asked, her voice a notch higher than usual. I didn't say a word. Just met her gaze. For a few seconds, the silence was louder than any accusation. She glanced at the phone. Saw how I had left the message thread open. The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, a defense already forming, but I held up my hand. "Don't," I said quietly. "Just, don't insult me with lies." Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, she looked like she might break down. But then, like flipping a switch, she straightened her posture. Composed. Controlled. "It's not what you think," she said. I almost laughed. Almost. "Emily, I'm reading your words. I don't need to think. I don't need to imagine. It's all right there." She sank into a chair, rubbing her temples like she was the one who had been wronged. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "Well," I said, leaning back, "you did." The weight of it settled in the room like a storm cloud. Part of me had thought this confrontation would bring some kind of release, like finally ripping off a bandage. But there was no relief. Just a dull, persistent ache. I didn't scream. I didn't throw accusations. I just sat there, watching the woman I thought I knew struggle to maintain her facade. "I swear, it wasn't serious," she said. "It was a distraction. A stupid mistake." That word. Mistake. As if her betrayal was the equivalent of forgetting to take out the trash. "Emily, a mistake is leaving the oven on. This took planning." "Lies. You don't trip and fall into someone's bed." She flinched. Good. A crack in her armor. But instead of remorse, she shifted. Defensive. Classic Emily. "Maybe if you'd been more present, more attentive, I wouldn't have felt so alone," she snapped. Ah, there it was. The twist. The deflection. Turned the mirror back on me. I should have expected it. I did expect it. But hearing it out loud still stung. "So this is my fault now?" I asked, shaking my head. "You betray me and somehow I'm to blame?" She looked down, her fingers nervously tapping the table. "I'm just saying, things haven't been right between us for a while. That doesn't give you a free pass to cheat, Emily." The conversation circled like that for a while. Her excuses got weaker. My patience wore thinner. But beneath all of it was the unspoken truth. The damage was done. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. That realization hit harder than anything else. For years, I'd built my life around Emily. Made sacrifices. Compromised. Believed in us. But somewhere along the way, she stopped doing the same. And I was the fool who didn't notice. That night, after she retreated to the bedroom, probably to text him, I stayed in the living room, staring at the ceiling. The house felt foreign. Like I was an intruder in my own life. I thought about every late meeting. Every night she came home smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. Every dismissive wave of the hand when I asked questions. The signs had been there. I just didn't want to see them. But now with the truth laid bare, there was no going back. I wasn't sure what came next. I wasn't ready to make decisions. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. The woman upstairs wasn't the woman I married. And our marriage, whatever was left of it, was hanging by a thread. The next few days after I found those messages were strange. Not explosive. Not cinematic. Strange. You'd think a discovery like that would spark a screaming match. Plates shattering. Doors slamming. But no. Our house became this quiet, uncomfortable battlefield. Like we were both standing at opposite ends, waiting for the other to make the first real move. Emily didn't confess. She didn't cry. Not really. She just acted like none of it happened. She'd go through the motions, making coffee in the morning, humming while she cooked dinner, scrolling on her phone like always. But there was a tension in her movements. Like she was walking a tightrope, careful not to trigger me. It was surreal. And honestly, that hurt more than if she'd just admitted it. One evening after another silent dinner where the clink of silverware felt deafening, I finally asked, "Are we going to talk about this?" She looked up from her plate, blinked, then gave me this look, this rehearsed, polished look of exasperation. The same one she used when I misplaced my keys or forgot to take out the trash. "What is there to talk about, James?" she said, her voice flat. Tired. Like I was the exhausting part of this. I almost laughed. Almost. I found the messages, Emily. The lies. The sneaking around. You can't spin this. She sighed. Loudly. Dramatically. I told you already. It wasn't serious. That's not the point, I said, keeping my voice steady. Serious or not, you crossed a line. You betrayed me. Don't make it sound smaller than it is. Her fork clattered onto her plate as she pushed it away, like this conversation was an inconvenience she hadn't penciled into her schedule. This is why I didn't tell you, she muttered, crossing her arms. Because you always blow things out of proportion. You're so paranoid, James. So controlling. There it was. The twist. The flip. Suddenly, it wasn't about her betrayal. It was about me being controlling. Because questioning her late nights, her lies, was apparently tyrannical behavior. I'm not controlling Emily, I said, my fists clenching under the table. I'm reacting to your actions. There's a difference. She stood up then, pacing the kitchen like she needed to stretch out her indignation. You never trusted me, she said, shaking her head. Not really. You're always waiting for me to screw up. And now that you've found something, you're using it as ammunition. Ammunition. As if I had planted the messages myself. I stayed seated, watching her unravel in real time. But beneath all her theatrics, one thing was crystal clear: she wasn't sorry. Not really. She was sorry she was caught. Sorry she had to deal with the consequences. But not sorry for what she'd done. You're right, I said quietly. I didn't trust you. And now I know why. That stopped her pacing. She spun around, eyes narrowing. Oh, so now I'm the villain? Convenient. No, Emily, I said, rising from my chair, meeting her glare head-on. You made yourself the villain. You lied. You cheated. Don't stand there and act like you're the victim. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across her face. Guilt? Fear? Hard to say. But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold detachment she'd been wearing like armor. You're not perfect, James, she said, voice low. You checked my phone. You violated my privacy. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's what this is about now? Privacy? You don't see how toxic that is, she pressed, emboldened now. Snooping through my messages? That's not love. That's control. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I knew what she was doing. Twisting the narrative. Turning this into my fault. But it wasn't going to work. I checked your phone because I knew you were hiding something. And I was right. She flinched. Slightly. Enough for me to notice. The silence stretched between us, thick with all the words we weren't saying. Finally, she exhaled, her shoulders slumping. James, I don't want to do this with you, she said, softer now. I'm tired. You're tired. Maybe we should just take some space. Cool off. Space. Another word for avoidance. You want space? I asked. From the consequences of your actions? That's not fair. Neither is being cheated on. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For once, she didn't have a quick comeback. But she was building something. I could see it. The way she was carefully choosing her words, crafting her next move. This wasn't remorse. This was strategy. I don't think you understand how unhappy I've been, she said finally. It wasn't about him. It was about me. About how I felt for months. I scoffed. And instead of talking to me, you talked to him. I tried talking to you, she insisted. But you were always busy. Distracted. You never really listened. That stung. Because maybe there was some truth buried in there. I wasn't perfect. I'd been consumed by work. By the daily grind. But a marriage is built on communication. And she'd chosen to communicate with someone else. I might have been distracted, I admitted. But I never disrespected you. I never betrayed you. Her eyes darted away, guilt creeping in, even if she wouldn't say it out loud. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she said, almost whispering. But it did, I replied. And now we're here. The weight of those words seemed to settle over both of us. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. It was Emily who broke the silence. I don't want a divorce, James. I raised an eyebrow. You've got a funny way of showing it. I made a mistake. A bad one. But we can fix this. We've been through worse. I wanted to laugh. Worse? This wasn't a bad vacation or a missed anniversary. This was fundamental. This was trust shattered beyond repair. I don't know if we can fix this, Emily, I said honestly. Not when you're still trying to downplay it. Not when you're more concerned with shifting blame than taking responsibility. Her lips trembled. Whether from frustration or realization, I couldn't tell. I'll do therapy, she offered. Couples counseling. Whatever it takes. Therapy won't fix dishonesty, I said, my voice quieter now. And it won't fix what you did. The conversation circled again and again. Promises. Excuses. Half apologies wrapped in self-defense. It was exhausting. Like trying to patch a sinking ship with duct tape. That night, I slept in the guest room. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a dramatic walkout. It was quiet. Muted. Like both of us knew this was the beginning of something inevitable. As I lay on that unfamiliar mattress, staring at the ceiling, I felt an overwhelming sense of isolation. I was still technically married, but the woman I was married to wasn't by my side anymore. Not really. Emily could say all the right words. She could promise therapy, offer band-aid solutions. But none of that could undo what had been done. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal with words alone. And deep down, I knew she wasn't telling me the whole truth. Not yet. But she would. One way or another. In the days that followed, things between Emily and me settled into a strange, tense rhythm. We lived like polite strangers, sharing the same space, exchanging hollow pleasantries, never touching the subject we were both suffocating under. It was a cold war. But beneath her calm surface, I could tell Emily was scrambling. She upped her "I want to fix this" talk, dropping lines about counseling, suggesting date nights like nothing had happened. She was laying bricks, building this narrative where she was the devoted wife who made a mistake and deserved forgiveness. But the cracks were still showing. And no matter how much she patched them up with sweet talk, the foundation was rotten. I didn't confront her again. I didn't need to. Instead, I started reaching out. Quietly. Carefully. I wasn't looking for drama, I was looking for truth. That's when I thought of Clara. Clara had been Emily's best friend since college. They were inseparable once, brunches, shopping trips, those long phone calls that made me feel like background noise. Lately, though, I noticed Clara hadn't been around much. No casual drop-ins. No Sunday mimosas. It wasn't like her. If anyone knew what Emily was really up to, it was Clara. I debated for hours before sending the message. Hey Clara. I hope this isn't awkward, but I need to talk. Privately. About Emily. She replied almost immediately. Clara, I was wondering when you'd reach out. Call me. That response alone made my stomach twist. She was expecting this. Which meant she knew something. When I called, Clara didn't waste time with small talk. I hate being in the middle of this, James, she said, her tone more tired than angry. But Emily, she's been lying to you for months. The confirmation hit like a gut punch, even though I thought I was ready for it. Tell me, I said. Please. No sugarcoating. There was a pause. Then Clara sighed like she'd been holding this in too long. She's been seeing someone else, James. For a while now. His name's Alex. They met through her work. Not just some random fling from a bar like she probably made it sound. The name was new. Not the guy from the party. Not some faceless friend from a message thread. This was specific. Personal. Real. Clara continued. It started as flirting. Casual. But it escalated. Fast. Emily was meeting him after work, during lunch breaks, even on weekends when she said she was with me. She used me as her cover more than once. I didn't want to get involved, but when you asked directly, I couldn't lie to you. I was gripping my phone so tightly my fingers hurt. She told me it was harmless at first. Said it was just fun. But then she started talking about leaving you. She even set up a separate bank account, James. She's been squirreling away money for months. And she's met with a lawyer. Quietly. Planning for a divorce. Without telling you. My breath left me. This wasn't just infidelity. This was betrayal, calculated and methodical. A long con. I felt nauseous. She's already planning to leave, I said, more to myself than to Clara. I'm sorry, James. I really am. I told her this would blow up in her face. She didn't listen. The worst part? I wasn't even angry at Clara. She was stuck in the fallout zone, trying to avoid shrapnel from Emily's choices. Thank you for telling me, I said quietly. I know that wasn't easy. There was a pause. For what it's worth, James, you deserved better from her. You still do. After the call ended, I just sat there, staring at nothing. The living room looked different somehow. Every framed photo, every souvenir from our trips felt fake. Like props in a play I wasn't part of anymore. Emily was planning her exit. Smiling to my face while quietly preparing to cut me out of her life. The affair was bad enough. But this level of deception? It hit differently. I thought about every conversation where she said we can fix this. Every suggestion of therapy. Every forced smile. All while she was hiding legal documents and bank statements behind my back. It was never about saving our marriage. It was about buying time. Keeping me in the dark long enough for her to make a clean break. And I'd been playing right into her hands. That night, Emily came home humming to herself. She kissed my cheek like everything was normal. Asked how my day was. Chatted about the weather. I looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered how she could lie so easily. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. The difference was, now I wasn't clinging to hope. I wasn't waiting for her to come clean. The illusion was shattered. The marriage, already hollow, was just an empty shell we were both standing in. But I wasn't going to let her be the one to burn it down on her terms. For the first time in weeks, my mind was clear. Emily thought she was playing chess. But I was done being a pawn. After Clara's revelation, there was no more room for denial. Emily wasn't just unfaithful, she was already halfway out the door, building a future without me. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a dramatic showdown. I just couldn't live in a lie anymore. One quiet evening, while Emily was out, I packed a bag. I wrote her a letter, not angry, not bitter, just honest. I told her I knew everything. That I wasn't going to fight for a marriage she'd already abandoned. I left my key on the table, walked out of the house, and didn't look back. Leaving wasn't defeat. It was freedom. I moved to a small town, far from the echoes of that life. Found work in a local firm. Life slowed down. Simple, peaceful. Over time, the weight of betrayal eased. I met Laura, a kind, unassuming woman who never pried, never judged. With her, I could just be James. No past, no drama. Healing wasn't instant, but it was real. Every day, I felt more like myself again. Emily became a distant chapter, painful but closed. This wasn't the life I planned, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.